Welcome everybody to AI Infra. So stoked to have us here and at the beautiful Microsoft campus. We've got Daniel, we've got Dr. Pavel from Synexis, and we're chatting a little bit about policy and tech and all sorts of crazy stuff. Guys, maybe you want to give a brief introduction on yourselves.
Yeah, easily. Thank you. I'm Dr. Pavel Vinitsky, CEO and founder of Synexis, a serial entrepreneur for 25 years and worked with startups of ecosystem for 15 years, both from investor side and working with startups and founding them, and realized the number of inefficiencies and decided that it's time to use the right technology that we have today to fix the issues there.
Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Daniel Campbell, formerly from NVIDIA, Borealis AI, and the government of Canada. My background is in artificial intelligence and deep neural networks, and I'm helping this guy make it all possible.
Man, what a wonderful team. Also, I just want to point out the kind of the beautiful irony that NVIDIA sent you to an AI conference. Dr. Pavel was one of the speakers, and then
And
that's
then
how the
magic
cookie
happens.
crumbles. Yeah.
Magic.
So, guys, just to dive into it, we're talking a little bit about the intersection of capital and policy and innovation. You mentioned the runaway train of capitalism, and are we able to slow this thing down, or what are your thoughts here, Daniel?
Yeah, so I was in Paris at the ICI conference, the first inaugural AI ethics and safety conference, where folks like Joshua Bengio and Jeffrey Hinton were there presenting some of their research. And the number one thing that you could hear across the academic and research crowd is that these folks are worried about the runaway train that is AI growth.
Yeah,
And quite frankly, it's not being slowed by the billions to trillions of dollars that are being poured in from a capital and VC perspective into AI. But what what the common cause is here, or the common language, is that quite frankly, if you try to slow this train, you're just going to be run over.
yeah,
And
sure.
at the end of the day, what most people are saying, and I like to use Max Teghart's MIT professor focusing on this space. Max looks at it a different way. He sees this more as a national security issue, and quite frankly, his chore is to try to convince both China and the U.S. that it's in their best interest to start to regulate this space more.
I see. I see. And how does the open source space kind of play into this? Because I know the fact that it was the model DeepSeek was trained for much less, and
Mhm.
of course it doesn't even touch on ByteDance, which is
Right.
a lot larger company with more
Yeah.
resources and data. So how do we kind of look at the open source versus the closed infrastructure for model development?
Great question, Nick. Quite frankly, if you look at China, for example, they're holding roughly 3 to 4x more patents than the US is currently in artificial intelligence. Now, they're not enforceable outside of China, but
Hmm.
it's important to note the innovation difference between these particular regions. What we're seeing is in the US, a lot of closed source development. Now, Meta and Fair, these folks are kind of leading the charge on open source models. We're starting to see that come out in corporate plays, right, in terms of internal innovation and using some of these open source models. But I think from a safety perspective, it's a genie in the bottle, man.
Sure.
You can't uncork or can't recork this
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, but it also feels, Dr. Pavel, I'm curious about what you think this year too. The most recent Family 4 of Llama, the model that Meta just put out, I think they're like from a benchmark perspective, like 35. So, I mean, are they falling behind, or do you think that maybe the closed source is the direction to go?
I think it's close. It will always be close. The question is, yes, if you have the more access to the larger capital, and it definitely can make things some things faster. But if we speak the general growth of the technology, you can't close that.
Sure.
100%. So
Yeah.
we will play the same game like in blockchain happens. So like we know that blockchain is used inside the private ecosystem. In the meantime, the technology that is public and open source gives a lot of growth and shining that the applications. So I see it will work the same way, and a lot of people can use open source models
Yeah.
to grow the companies and then identify whether it's worth it to go to the private part or not.
Yeah, no, very well put. And so it's almost like we've got, you're combining or comparing, I should say, like a huge market of folks that are building collectively versus like a walled garden of safety and security, which is obviously those two things are
Well, we
both
need
important.
both. We
Yeah,
need both because if we speak about like separate specific industries like defense and others, we have it's where we will always have the closed ecosystems. It always be that because of
yeah,
national interest, because of specific finance parts. Like if we work with highly specific data, like health data. We will work on
sure.
we will work with closed ecosystem always, so it
Yeah,
will be back
that's
to back
very
all the
true.
time.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
and what about the what is it? Not the H100s, but the throttle down chip that NVIDIA made that is now no longer available. Does it make sense to for us to try to slow down China, or should we just focus on running as fast as we can?
See, this is the problem. I mean, access to the underlying hardware is a massive boost to the innovation capacity. You train faster, you've got better throughput. These are big deals. Now, I will say I've met, you know, several people that have been able to jailbreak these particular
Wow.
cards and these boxes.
But we're not going to mention who those.
No, we are not. We are not.
But this is their home address. No.
Yeah.
It will be in the description.
In the show notes below.
Exactly. For the Patreon.
Yeah.
But no, so like what we've understood though is there is a national security risk in this. This is why we've seen some of the trade regulation that we have, whether it's fruitful or
Justified
not from this
or
perspective.
right.
It's debatable, but I think as we move forward, looking at going back to your question around closed source and open source, when you have that innovation capacity from a hardware perspective, you're bound to start to close that gap just because of access to hardware becoming more and more cost effective. Right. So now you're beginning to see, because the innovation scaling, we're breaking scaling constraints that we've seen in terms of innovation capacity on these cards, which means that folks at home or in homegrown labs or in smaller ventures are now able to some degree catch up with the big guys, which is why you're seeing open source models come out from smaller players we haven't heard of before. And that's why these guys are now around the block and name brand names.
Sure. When you're talking about constraints, Dan, is it more of like the price to be able to run these models? My understanding is that these models are becoming 4x cheaper every 12 months, give or take.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And roughly 2x more effective to 3x more effective.
Oh my God.
Right?
So it really is a runaway train.
It really is.
Yes,
And
it is.
It's exciting time to be alive, though.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are like perfectly situated building Synexis. In fact, maybe you could share a little bit about the problem you're solving and how folks can learn more, perhaps.
Yeah, it's easy. Just look, we have 2.5 more X of startups than pre-pandemic levels. Number of companies is growing. If you will consider the capital, how it's deployed today, the number of deals is shrinking. A lot of money there are a lot of money on the market today.
Sure.
So market looks like better than it was like post-pandemic, but a lot of capital is deployed on the large deals, right?
That was actually my question is it the early, the mid, or the late stage that tends to get more of the slice of the pie?
Depends on, because like now the boundaries are diluted, because even if it's a seed company, they can raise crazy amount that before we would consider something like Series B.
Yeah.
So in AI, everything changed.
Friends and family for 200 million.
Why not? Like, why not Series A for $1 billion or two?
I like those numbers.
Yeah. So then, if you will look at the pictures, like what is the average median numbers for the rounds, they look like reasonable, but that includes that large ones.
Sure.
So the question is, more companies, less number of deals.
I see.
It does mean the competition is growing, and it's tougher and for investors to make the decision who to bring money.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, for founders to find the right investor and find the possibility to raise these funds. This is the problem we tackle from one side. From another side, it's a data problem. Data is everything, right? So we speak about the deal making. You need quality data to analyze and make the decision making fast. Okay, data today, in most of the possible ways to get it, let's call it poison. It's static, it's outdated, and due to AI, we have raised another problem. It's often synthetic.
Yeah.
So how to make this decision? So that's the thing. So what we build at Synexis, we call it a deal flow intelligence.
Okay, so like a VC on steroids, kind of a thing.
We touch 3 points. It's startups, it's investors of all kinds, from angels, family offices to investors, and we touch enterprise market because they also want to find good companies to work with or acquire, or
and a lot of them are just going direct and kind of circumventing the 2 and 20 split, right?
Nick, I mean, we're seeing 70% of the time that investors or that startups are spending on their fundraising stage is wasted, because 97% of their outbound is ignored. And what we've realized is that,
which is so funny, like turning down capital, right?
I know. And quite frankly, on the investor side, I mean, these guys are spending $250,000 just to do the screening and initial due diligence.
Just part of the story only.
That sounds so barbaric in retrospect.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, I'd love to have the zombie community be valuable to you guys. Is there perhaps a website that folks can learn more about? Or please.
Synexis, synexis.io. This is where you can find all the stuff, create your profile, and get benefits right away. And yeah, we use AI agents, so we provide the digital employees for all sites. So they automate the process and for startups and for investors. So like, why not to add digital employee to your team and work with that?
Beautiful. Well, really appreciate it, guys. Shout out to Bill Berry and the Ignite team and Jessica and all those good folks. Appreciate you guys coming on. Enjoy the
Thank you
rest
so
of the
much.
show here.